There is a remote stretch of land in League City, Texas, between Houston and Galveston. It sits just off Calder Road, bordered by dirt paths, oil equipment, and open fields. At a glance, it looks like many other undeveloped areas in the region. For years, people passed by without noticing anything unusual. That changed in the 1980s. Over the course of several years, investigators made 4 separate discoveries in this same field. 4 bodies, 4 women, found at different times, under different circumstances, but in the same isolated location. The area was rural, rarely visited, and far enough from main roads that a person could come and go without being seen. The women did not appear connected. One was a teenager, one worked as a bartender, one was a mechanic in her 30s, another was a young mother. They came from different backgrounds and were at different points in their lives. There was no obvious link between them, except where they were found. As investigators began to recognize the pattern, the field gained a name: the Killing Fields. Years later, the murders remain unsolved. Despite decades of investigation, advances in forensic science, and continued efforts by both local police and the FBI, the person or people responsible have never been identified. The cases are considered cold, but they are not closed. The first silence. In 1983, Heidi Fye disappeared in League City, Texas. She was a young woman working as a bartender, living independently. When she failed to return home, concern grew, but her case did not immediately trigger a large-scale response. Missing adults often do not. Months later, her body was found in a rural field off Calder Road. There were no witnesses, no clear suspects, no obvious trail of evidence. Her body had been left in an isolated area that few people visited. After that, the case stalled. But 1 year later, it happened again. Laura Miller was 16 years old. She had recently moved to League City with her family and was still adjusting. Laura was musically talented and deeply interested in singing, but recurring seizures had disrupted her schooling and isolated her socially. On September 10, 1984, Laura asked her mother to drive her to a nearby store so she could use a payphone to call her boyfriend. The family phone had not yet been connected. Laura planned to walk the short distance home afterward, which was less than half a mile. She never arrived. Initially, police treated Laura's disappearance as a runaway case. At the time, this was a common conclusion when teenagers went missing. Her family was told to wait as she would likely return. She did not. More than a year later, Laura Miller's body was discovered in the same field where Heidi Fye had been found. 2 victims, 1 location. During the search connected to Laura's disappearance, investigators made another discovery. A 3rd body was located in the same area. The woman could not be identified. There were no matching missing person reports and no dental records on file. She was listed as Jane Doe. In 1991, a 4th body was found nearby. Like the 3rd victim, she could not be identified at the time. She became known as Janet Doe. 4 women, the same field. No arrests were made. A case that wouldn't rest. The League City Police Department remained the lead agency on the investigation. As the scope of the case became clearer, the FBI joined, contributing forensic analysis, behavioral profiling, and long-term investigative support. Despite this, the case did not break open. There were no confirmed witnesses to any of the murders. No single suspect has been clearly linked to all 4 victims. No definitive physical evidence was tying the crimes together beyond the location itself. Investigators developed a behavioral profile that suggested the possibility of one offender, someone familiar with the area, someone who understood how isolated the fields were, and how unlikely it was that bodies would be discovered quickly. Multiple offenders could not be ruled out, but the consistency of the location raised questions. Time became the greatest obstacle. "People forget," said Special Agent Richard Renison. "People pass away. Memories fade." For Renison, the case was personal. He grew up in the region and began his law enforcement career with the League City Police Department shortly after the 4th body was discovered. As a young detective, he worked the case early on. Later, he joined the FBI. In 2005, he became the case agent for the Calder Road murders. He has remained connected to the investigation ever since. A cold case, Renison has emphasized, does not mean inactive. Evidence is reviewed. Leads are re-examined. New information is tested against old assumptions. Sometimes, the only thing investigators can do is wait for science to advance. Names return to the dead. For more than 20 years, 2 of the victims had no confirmed identities. Jane Doe and Janet Doe existed only as case numbers, without names or histories. That changed in 2019. Advances in forensic DNA technology made it possible to identify remains that had once been impossible to trace. Early that year, investigators received confirmation. Jane Doe was identified as Audrey Lee Cook. Cook was 30 years old. She worked as a mechanic and had lived in several areas around Houston, including Channelview and the Heights. She was last seen in December 1985. After that, she disappeared. Janet Doe was identified as Donna Gonsoulin Prudhomme. Donna was a mother of two. She grew up in the Port Arthur area of Texas. She loved cooking Cajun food and spending time outdoors fishing. Her life had included hardship, but she remained closely connected to her family. With names, investigators gained more than identification. They gained timelines, social circles, workplaces, and locations, people to contact, records to review. Details that once seemed irrelevant now mattered. In long unsolved cases, context can be the difference between stagnation and progress. The families who waited. Tim Miller, Laura's father, rejected the idea that Laura had run away. As weeks turned into months, he began researching similar cases and conducting searches himself. 17 months later, Laura's body was found. The loss reshaped Miller's life. He went on to found Texas EquiSearch, a nonprofit organization dedicated to locating missing persons. The group has since assisted in hundreds of recoveries across the country. "I would never leave a family alone," Miller said. For Diane Gonsoulin Hastings, the waiting stretched over 3 decades. Her sister Donna had endured an abusive marriage and left to protect her children. Later, she tried to rebuild her life. She stayed in contact with her family, even during difficult periods. Then the communication stopped. Donna's sons grew up without their mother. One of them was later paralyzed in a serious car accident and repeatedly asked his aunt about her. He died before Donna was identified. For years, Diane was left with uncertainty. Investigators found no trace of Donna. A private investigator eventually told her she had 2 choices: believe Donna had started a new life or accept that she was likely dead. Diane never believed her sister had walked away. She loved her kids, she said. In 2019, the call finally came. Donna's remains had been identified. She had been Janet Doe. Her family held a funeral decades after her death. For Diane, the focus is no longer on punishment. It is on healing, changing the ground beneath the story. The area around Calder Road no longer looks the way it did in the 1980s and early 1990s. Development has expanded. Roads are paved. Homes sit nearby. The land itself is now owned by a local church. In the field where the bodies were found, a memorial has been created. Each woman has a marker with her name, photograph, and personal mementos. The space is quiet, deliberate, and cared for. The name has changed. What was once known as the Killing Fields is now called the Healing Fields. Plans are now in place to build a small park on the site. For Tim Miller, reclaiming the space matters. For Richard Renison, the work is not finished. As he approaches retirement, these remain the only cold cases he has worked that have not been resolved. He believes someone still holds information, something small, something forgotten, something dismissed years ago, and he wants it. Anything, he says, no matter how small, because the case is still open and the search for answers continues.